Kia ora koutou. I'm pleased to introduce Jan Adams, Pinnacle's Nursing Director, who's going to lead the session on leadership and management. So over to you, Jan. Thank you.
Kia ora Hildy. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to kick off the series of nurse leadership and presentations. I'm doing tonight leadership and management and what's the difference, and then we've got a series of presentations over the next 10 weeks of different speakers. Feel a little bit nervous being number one, but I'm leading from the front, so I'm just going to go into sharing my screen and then I'll take you through the slides. We also, there'll be some questions posed through my presentation, and Hildy will put you into smaller breakout groups so you can have a little bit of discussion and reflection. But there's no sort of right and wrong answers, there's no tests at the end. This is really just to give you some information and hopefully enhance your learning. And then we can hear from you at a later stage about what you might like more or less of. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, so this, as I said, is leadership and management, and what's the difference? On this first slide, I like this quote from Lao Tzu, who is a Chinese philosopher, who wrote that a leader is best when people barely know he exists, not so good when people obey and acclaim him, worse when they despise him, but of a good leader who talks little, when his work is done, his aim fulfilled, they will say, we did it ourselves. And if you note, this is 2,500 years ago, and I think this still sums up the art of a good leader today. They actually engage the team, they give praise to the team, and the team believe that they've played a very big part in whatever's been achieved. So if you can just think about any reflections you may have on that, think about, have you worked for a leader who's inspired you? You may want to jot down a few things and take them into your breakout rooms so you can discuss them later. So the first question is, what is leadership? And the first thing to say is leadership has been absolutely studied for decades and decades. Lots of people have made lots of money on leadership. So the question about what makes good leaders is very relevant now as much as it has been in all of the studies. And what we know is there's a number of different types of leadership. These are some of the more common or popular styles. And I'll just take you through them very quickly. So autocratic leadership, we'll have all seen this over our careers. And this is a very strict hierarchical leadership. I don't know if any of you know the British series Yes Minister, but it's that very yes, you know, sort of bowing, paying attention to the leader and what they say, and not really challenging the status quo. The thing about autocratic leadership, it can be a very negative style of leadership. It's very much do as I say, this is what we're doing, and it involves little consultation or consensus with staff. In terms of democratic leadership, this is a much more consensus style management of leadership. It encourages ideas sharing and regular employee participation, so much more inclusive style of leadership. The manager always, or the leader always retains the final say-so, but they make their decisions with the team involved, and it's quite a popular form of leadership and one we still see today. Laissez-faire is as it sounds really, it's whatever, you know, our teenagers could practice this style of leadership, whatever, we'll get there. And it's very freedom orientated. Employees do what they can with little to no interference, and they're very much sort of self-directed team. It's not a style for everybody, and it doesn't often get results because there's a lot of fluidity, as you can imagine, in what happens. Sorry, I've just gone off the slide there. Servant leadership is a very interesting form of leadership. It's a more modern type of leadership, and the main goal of the leader in this leadership style is to serve. They share power. They put the needs of the people at the heart of what they're doing, and the people that they're focused on developing their staff and their staff to perform as highly as possible. So you can imagine this is a very popular and productive style of leadership. When we talk about agile leadership, again, this is a more modern type of leadership, and it's the leadership that creates the right context for self-organization. So it's very context-based. You see this in a lot of project management teams. They're very collaborative. They learn from each other. They get focused on quality and continuous learning, and it's a very rapid type of leadership. It's results-based, action-orientated, quick. A lot of younger people tend to really, really enjoy this type of leadership because it gives a lot more freedom as well. And then we've got charismatic leadership. Charismatic leadership's been around for quite a while, but really it is, as it says, you've got a very engaging leader who uses a lot of emotional intelligence to engage the team. They'll take risks, but they take the team with them, and they have this sort of self-belief that they can achieve. And I think we've all known charismatic leaders as well. One problem with charismatic leadership is if you've got introverts in the team, they can find this a very difficult style of leadership because you've got this big personality, big charisma of a leader. And often the more introverted within the team can feel that they're being left behind or that they're struggling to find their place in this team. So it's a good thing to be aware of some of the downsides of these different sides of leadership as well as the positives. But what we see in leaders is that there's key themes that emerge. Most leaders are very inspiring. They have a vision, they know where they're going, and they can inspire people to go on the journey with them. They're very authentic. They know who they are, they know their place in the world, and they're comfortable with that. So they're not pretentious, they don't have to be somebody they're not. They're genuinely authentic. Totally passionate, believe in what they're doing, results-based, ready to sort of get an outcome. And they're very values-based as well. So you often find these are the people that really do every day live the values of the organisation that they work within or work for. And they're always accountable, hugely accountable, responsible for actions and outcomes as well. And so these are the things that over years have been studied to say these are the key traits and these are what you see in good leaders. So when you look at the research, and I didn't want to make this a research project, but I think it's always useful to know that obviously this has been well studied. And the key traits of leadership are things that you see time and time again from these people. So House talks about the individual, the ability of an individual to influence, to motivate and bring others to contribute towards the effectiveness and the success of the organisation that they're working within. Cotter is an avid researcher. Many people will know of Cotter. And he talks about leadership encompassing attitudes to inspire. And again, we see this influencing, inspiring, motivating. Bass and Stodgill talk about leaders' power being legitimized by their followers. And I think it's always strong to remember you are only as good as the people you work with and the people you work for. So most leaders are not ego-driven and egocentric. They're actually legitimized by the people that they work with or their followers, as Bass calls them. And leaders influence others. And Zalon Zendik and George and Sims talk about they inspire self-efficacy, they establish desires, and they consistently follow this set of values. And you saw that in the previous slide where we talked about these are the people that live the organization's values every day. So they're just some of the key traits and some of the research that you may want to go on and look more into. But what we know about good leaders is they listen. And when we will have all experienced this, I'm sure you've experienced it, that you may go to meetings or you'll be talking to your manager or your leader, and they say, yes, I'm listening, but they're not hearing, they're not listening really to what you're saying, they're actually going through the motions. So listening is a critical aspect of leadership. And we know many people don't listen. They may be hearing, but they're not listening. And to become an effective leader, it says here you have to close your mouth sometimes and truly listen to your team. And that can be really hard. And I know over my time as a manager and a leader, I've had to really, really practice active listening. Because when you have a team, they're made up of different personalities. You've got to be aware of the team, the way they're feeling, who's contributing, who's not contributing, and truly listen to every member of the team and engage them so they can all have their views heard. When you take time to listen, you're actually showing that you value the people that you're in the room with, and it's the ultimate form of respect. And if you look bored and who haven't been in meetings where you can see people starting to drift, look at their phones, etc., it's showing that actually what they're saying or the meeting you're in is really not important, and you don't care what that person has to say. And I think for leaders in particular, they have to be really careful, especially in the age of cell phones and iPads, to not be distracted by what's coming through, because it's really showing the team that they're working with, actually, you're not that important, I'm here because I have to be. So it's something to be very aware of. And you should never be too busy to listen, because it is the ultimate form of respect. So a couple of years ago, I heard a really nice saying about that fits nicely with this. And what it is people may not remember what you said, they will not remember what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And I think for me, in terms of active listening, that is something really important to remember. They will always remember how you made them feel. And when you have a leader who's genuinely engaged, who takes time to listen and is actively listening and can reflect back some of what you've heard, then it shows that you're really valuing your people and you really want to understand their viewpoint and what they can contribute. So Hildy's going to put you into little breakout groups shortly. So just think about, and I'll leave this slide up, think about the leadership in your practice or your team and ask, do you see any of those traits in your leaders? Do they practice active listening? Do they inspire you? Do they have a vision for the business? So I'll hand back to Hildy, and she's going to put you in to your teams. And then when we come back, we'll just have a little bit of feedback. Not everybody has to contribute, but we're interested in hearing from you. Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you had some good conversations going on, and now we're going to talk about what's the difference between leadership and management. And management is really a lot more operational. So leadership that tends to be visionary, the people that are in charge of taking the organisation forward, building new ideas, etc., etc. But actually management is much more operational process and outcome orientated. So it's really the process of dealing with or controlling things or people. And this is where we see our managers perform, often in the deployment of staff, the management of financial resources, technology, etc., etc. So it's really about directing and controlling the group of people within an organisation to reach a goal. So it's much more operational, much more hands-on, day-to-day focused. I thought this was a really nice slide of the difference between management and leadership, because what we see is that management on the one side is about planning, organising, about the staffing, coordinating and controlling. And on the other side, we've got leadership, which is about influencing, motivating, inspiring, things that we talked about earlier. But in the middle, as you can see, there is some crossover between the two. And that's about the communication, the problem solving, and the decision making that often leadership and management sort of have this crossover. Most things have a bit of a crossover. So they're the things that are common to both. And we know that with management, as with leadership, there are different styles, and these are the common styles that you see that are popular in management. And so we've got the very results-based manager. What does that mean? What it means is this is really bottom line management. These are the people that may have a budget, they set the KPIs, they're driving to a goal, and they're pretty it's a pretty autonomous style, but it's not overly prescriptive, but it actually gets the job done. And really, it doesn't suit everybody, because there's this constant drive. What are your KPIs? Where are you up to on this? What's your latest performance, etc. Some people can find that a bit of a forceful and unhelpful style. When we look at democratic, this is a very inclusive, similar as we saw with democratic style of leadership, very inclusive style. one that recognises that the people within the team are often the experts, and so what they think is important and can be right. And they'll sort of work with the team and say, what do you think? Okay, let's do that. So it engages the team in discussion rather than one person taking complete authority to get everything done. It can create very strong team bonds where you've got a very good democratic team. They get lots of things done. But ultimately, somebody has to make a decision. And often in democratic management, that's where it can fail because perhaps the manager fails to take account for the decision that needs to be made. In transformational, this is a let's be better. What does the future look like? Big dreams, how can we get there? And it encourages team members to go beyond anything that they were comfortable with. Think big. It tends to be sort of focuses on a team with high performance. And it works well in very fast-paced environments. So again, you often see this in a project-based thing where you've got a limited time, lots to achieve, and there's this whole sort of transformational approach to getting the team working. As with agile and leadership and transformational management can lead to burnout because it's so fast-paced, it doesn't stop, and people can actually feel exhausted and really not enjoy it. They might do it for one project, but you often hear them say, I couldn't do that again because it's so fast-paced. When we look at servant leaders, this is in management, it's similar to servant leadership. Puts people first about what's needed, and what needs to be, puts the people first, and what's needed to be done is secondary to these people because it's about taking the team on the journey, developing. It means that people grow and develop and often perform to take on sort of bigger roles as they sort of go through this style. It does focus on people being friends with each other, and so sometimes not a lot can happen. And often where you've got teams with servant leaders as a manager, they're so focused on being everybody's friends, it can create disharmony in the team as well, because again, a manager has to manage and make decisions. When we see transactional leadership, this is the leadership style that everybody's like, can we just get it done? Stop asking questions. Let's focus on finishing this job. So very focused on getting a result. Transactional leadership is the type of thing that uses rewards to get things done. So this is often things that are brought in for short-term things where people may get a bonus or an additional payment, etc., to do this. Let's get this new system in. You'll all get a $5,000 bonus. Not you personally, but you get the gist. You'll all get a $5,000 bonus if we reach that, deliver on time, etc., etc. The problem with transactional leadership is, yes, it can get results, but often it's because it's a one-off, and when that type of bonus or incentive stops, teams become very demotivated very quickly. So you do have to be really careful when you put a transactional style in place, because once that's taken away, you get a lot of dissatisfaction. And then we see a coaching management style, which is a relatively new style, and it really focuses on partnership and collaboration within teams. It's very creative, and it focuses on feedback through coaching and learning, and the team builds things together and gets things done because they're growing and developing at a comfortable pace with everybody. So really, there's no one style that suits everybody, but the wrong style in any of these can absolutely demotivate employees and can affect productivity. So, as managers or as a leader, you need to constantly be aware of the signals that your employees are giving you about things that you're perhaps doing or asking them to contribute to whenever you're engaging any of these styles. So what we know is that this is the sort of stuff that good managers do, and they do constantly. They inspire growth. They realise the importance of relationships, and they want staff to develop and grow. They want them to be successful. They want them to everybody to reach their potential, and they won't often stop until that's achieved. one of the hard things about being a manager is you learning early on that not everybody can be a type A personality and an overachiever. But what you need to understand and realize within your team is everybody has a role to play and everybody has a contribution to make. They may be quieter, they may be working to their absolute maximum potential, and that's okay. And so your job as a manager is to make sure that everybody in the team is inspired to excellence, whether they're the type A, the overachiever, or whether they're just the quiet plodder, or they're somebody that contributes in a very good way, but a less brisk and forthright way. So it's important to inspire excellence so that you focus on what good looks like and everybody in the team helps each other to get there. Managers always ensure accountability. They have to be accountable for their actions and outcomes, and then they have to be accountable from top to bottom. But it's really important to engage a no blame culture style. Managers, the bucks, when you realize the buck stops with you, whether you're at a very, very senior manager, a chief executive, or whether you're managing a small team, you are accountable for that team and their outputs. And one of the quotes that I love the most is from Florence Nightingale, which is very relevant in the year of the nurse and midwife. And Florence said many, many years ago, "I never gave or took any excuses." And I think what that means is, she, even in those early days, was hugely accountable. So she didn't give any excuses, but she also never took excuses from people. And I think it's really good to just remember those sort of simple quotes because it helps sum up these type of words around accountability, etc. And then driving teamwork is really critical to a team's success. And I've said in other presentations, where you get this sole star or the lone star in a team, that very seldom works, and they very seldom achieve anything on their own, unless they run their own business, of course. But actually, most teams have people that are performers and contribute in different ways, and that's what makes a really good team, and that's what's important for managers to be able to bring out the best of. But unfortunately, any one of the above is not good enough. So you can't just be totally accountable. You've got to do all of these things, and you have to do them all regularly. So it's a bit like it's a bit of a tough gig being a manager, but it's very rewarding as well. You've often got juggling priorities, and you see people that are good managers often very calm on the surface, and they're all paddling underneath to keep afloat, because the reality of work is that's what happens. Things will challenge you every day, and it's how you get the team to work, how you inspire them to say, we can do this, let's just think about it logically and then move forward. So I just thought again, we'll go into our breakout groups now. So think about your managers. What style do they adopt and how does it make you feel? What style of management do you think gets the best results? What style would you adapt and why? And what will you do differently? So you don't have to answer all of those, but if you can just have a conversation around that, that would be really useful. Thank you. We'll see you soon. So I thought to finish and just sort of reflecting on the conversations that have been had, and thank you for your feedback. I would just give you a bit of an insight into my leadership and, well, management and leadership journey, and things that I would tell myself now if I was 18. I had to do a talk a number of years ago on, somebody asked me to do a talk on my career path, and I thought it would be the most boring thing ever. And I'd been reading The Woman's Day, I think it was, and there's things I would tell my 18-year-old self, and I thought that's perfect. So I'm going to disclose things I would tell my 18-year-old self, which I hope puts in context some of the opportunities and the issues and the challenges that I've had over my career. So the first thing I tell myself is you'll never regret your career choice. I am a nurse and midwife. I'm very proud to be a nurse and midwife, and I have always kept my practicing certificate. I still have it today. I had it when I was a chief operating officer and a managing director. And the reason I'm proud to be a nurse and why that's important to me is it absolutely grounds me. It's who I am. It's what I do. And even as managing director, as I was in my previous role, and the chief operating officer prior to that, being a nurse and understanding the needs of the patient absolutely grounds you with a lot of the decisions you have to make. So I would encourage anybody to go into nursing. It's a fantastic career choice. It's given me great opportunities, and I think it's the same for many people. But it is grounding. It was formative for me, and I will be a nurse and a midwife, I think, until the day I die. The second thing I'd say is it's okay to step back and take time. I remember early on in my career, I was just about to go on a very high-powered management course and found out that I was pregnant with our child, our son, who was a very special baby. We'd waited a long time for him. And I made the decision, no, I want to just step back, do what I'm doing, and take time to be a mum and have this beautiful boy who's now 29. And so it's okay to step back and take time, because good things come to good people, as I've put later, and having time to do what's important to you rather than being in a rush is really important. I tell myself that you'll be tested and you'll enjoy highs and lows. And I think any career is peppered with highs and lows. And I remember one example that I give is when I was in my mid-20s, I was a midwifery sister in a new regional newborn intensive care unit. We had some very, very sick babies in the unit. And I went in one evening, there was a new baby in the unit. She was a 32-weeker, pink in air. But her mum was quite agitated at the side of her incubator, and I'd introduced myself, and she said about my colleague, who was the senior sister and in charge of the unit, if that sister stays on duty, I'm taking my baby home. And I was challenged to think, what do I do about this, and talk to her about it. The top and bottom of the issue was that the senior sister had a drink problem, and she was on duty having consumed alcohol. So I had to ring the nursing officer, as it was in those days, and she came down, and the senior sister was removed from duty and was off sick for a good period of time. The little 32-weeker stayed pink in oxygen and happily recovered and went home, and has probably led a very lovely life. What happened to me as a result of that was that my colleagues, we'd been in 3 different hospitals that amalgamated into one brand new district general hospital only weeks before this. And my colleagues from the 2 other hospitals did what we called in the UK, sent me to Coventry. So they didn't physically send me to Coventry, but they sort of ostracize you. And they ostracized me for 8 months. So every time you came on duty, there'd be snide remarks. People would say, oh, I actually don't want to work with Jan because she'll probably snitch on me, these type of things. It only stopped when the senior sister came back 8 months later, and she came to the unit, and she came in actually with some of the people that had been giving me a hard time. And she said, I just want to say thank you, because you were the only person who had the courage to make me say I had a problem and I needed to deal with it. So she was an alcoholic. She used to go into her car she would always work nights, which gave her a lot less visibility. And she used to drink vodka in her car in the middle of her shift, and she would come back on duty. The sad thing for me was that was a really difficult thing to live through in terms of the way people reacted and the way I was treated. But I know that for that baby, for that month, for those babies I was responsible for, it was the right thing to do. The sad thing about it is her colleagues knew, they'd always known X had a problem, but nobody did anything about it. And I learned a lot about myself during that time, and I learned a lot about leadership and management, about what was good and what was bad, and what people will sort of sweep under the carpet. I'll also know that good things come to good people. I've had lots of opportunities. I haven't sought them. I've had, I was chosen to do the National Women's Neonatal Chest Physiotherapy Inquiry because of my neonatal background. I had lots of anger from physiotherapists about why was I doing it, not a physio, and they sort of failed to realise it was actually about looking with an open set of eyes and a different set of eyes to what happened. I've had lots of opportunities to set up new units, to grow and develop into, Chief Operating Officer from a Director of Nursing. And I'm not unique. Good people, good things come to them all the time, and you'll be given lots of opportunities. I tell myself that I'll move countries and experience new things. We came to New Zealand in 1992 when our beautiful son was 14 months old. And in a way, you sort of take a step back in your career journey to settle a family in. But we've had a fantastic time. New Zealand is our home. We've experienced lots of fantastic things that we would never have done, both at a work level and a personal level, had we stayed in the UK. I think all of us can identify with this. If you work hard, you're always rewarded. And that doesn't mean to say financial rewards, but it's some of the opportunities that you get to see things through. And when they're at a point of completion, you step back and think, the reward is stepping back and thinking, wow, I was a part of that and it was fantastic. The thing that I say to people that's, I think, really important, and especially for sort of the new grads amongst you and those of you young in your career, you don't have to be in a rush. There's always plenty of time to take the next step. And I think it saddens me that there's so much pressure to say to people, so what's your career path? What are you going to be doing next? What's the next step you're going to take? And it doesn't have to be like that. The most important thing is that you learn from every opportunity you're given, and that you use that experience to build on for when you do take the next step. I tell myself I'd learn from the best and the worst. I have worked for some very, very, very bad chief executives, table bangers, shouters, screamers, door slammers, and those that are at the opposite end of the scale, who are very measured and calm and are much more focused on the team and getting the outcome and the outputs through team and collaboration. So learn from the best and worst, because you look at people and think, I will never, ever do that. And I think sometimes it's good to see some of those behaviours that are confronting, because you absolutely know that that is not a style that you're going to adopt. I tell myself to be yourself, never try to be anybody else, and remain humble. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a sister, I'm a daughter, I'm an auntie, I'm a friend, I'm a colleague. That's who I am. I'm a nurse and midwife, and those are the things that are important to me and that ground me all the time. And so, yes, I've had some great jobs. I've had some very senior jobs. I've had opportunities to, be deputy chair of nursing council, etc. But at the end of the day, I am who I am, and that's what's important to remember. And then the final thing I'd say is enjoy every moment. Time flies, and I'm nearer retirement than I think, actually. And I think that when I look back and for my 18-year-old self, because I remember so vividly when I was a first-year student nurse at 18, walking past the porter's lodge, as it was in those days, every morning, to go to your wards on duty. And I used to blush profusely in those days. And I had this burgundy type coat, and they used to make me blush, I think, to try and match the colour of my coat. And they'd shout as I went past, "Good morning, matron." And for an 18-year-old, that was so embarrassing and so confronting, because you're trying to think that you'll get through the first year, let alone think about being a matron. But I've loved everything. I've had fantastic opportunities. I've had, great experiences. I've worked with amazing people, and I feel as if I've been very, very privileged. So in wrapping up, I'd say enjoy every moment, because time really does fly, and the years go by so quickly, and you want to look back and think, wow, that was a great career. And I hope that you do the same when you're my great age, that you can look back and think, if I was 18, what would I tell myself? And you can pass those things on as well to your family, your whānau, your friends, and just, give them a snippet of your career. So that's the end of the presentation. I hope it's been useful. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please feel free to email Hildy or I if you've got any questions or you want to know any more. And I look forward to seeing you next week when we do the next one in the series. Luckily, I'm going to be a participant now, not a presenter, so that feels really good. And enjoy your evening, or enjoy your day as well. Thank you.
Kia ora, Jen. That was really great. Some really good concepts in there, which will give people a lot of reflection. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. This presentation will be available through Pinnacle YouTube, and also you can get hold of the presentation separately if you wish. So we'll say good night and see you next week. Thank you, everybody.